Hello, I'm going to introduce you to the 18th century, the historical background, the key words, the key ideas, and so that when we read the new writers of the century, you'll be able to understand the background. It's a century also known as the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason. And it is probably the foundation of our present age. I've posted. One is called Transition to the 18th Century, and the other is called Introduction to the 18th Century. Now let's start with the first one. As you know, one of the symbols of this new age was Versailles, the castle of Versailles, the gardens of Versailles. Louis XIV in the 17th century made Versailles like a stage for a performance, for a play, for a theatrical production. He wanted to show through that structure how he had absolute control of nature and so of the world. If you have a look at the gardens, it's very interesting to see how there were trees from different parts of the world. Trees, plants that could grow only in other parts, not in France. But what did they do? If it was not natural to have some plants in France with that weather, they had plants that could be moved into a greenhouse indoor if the weather was too cold, and put then outside in the garden if the weather was more temperate. In a way, he wanted to demonstrate that he could control nature. Nature was something he could use and dispose according to his whims, to his desires. So we have tropical plants in France where they should not be, but they were used in such a way as that he could play with them. Another thing that is interesting to see is that in the 17th century, these are just the foundations of the new century. There were different very important scientific discoveries, like Galileo, for example, and so others. And one of those new scientists was Isaac Newton. Now, this man is quite important. He's probably one of the founders of physics, of science. In his opinion, nature could be explained. How? Using a mathematical formula. You could understand everything that were around you. All natural phenomena were based, in his opinion, on mathematics. So he imposed, in a way, his vision that nature has an order, follows an order that is based on reason, on logic. And this idea was the foundation of the Age of Reason. The reason, logic, was the leading force of the century. this appeal, this role of science was increased in France by the so-called the new philosophers who wrote the so-called encyclopedia. They try to popularize, to make easy to understand the theories of the new scientists. All was based on reason. Nature was classified. Animals were classified. Everything was explained in a simple, logical way. Another thing that was typical of the period was that the world, in their opinion, was like a machine, like a clock, a mechanism. You could take it apart, piece by piece, and then you can analyze each part and then understand its workings. You can see that today this idea that you can analyze, taking a living thing like a person or an animal or nature apart into its components, and analyze each one of them is not. It will never give you the real idea of what is a living creature. But in those years, in that age, they believed that reason and logic was used to analyze, was enough. And so this is what is going to happen in their period. Let's move now to the second document, the 18th century. As you can see, it starts with the introduction of in England of the two-party system. That is the Whigs and the Tories. It was a century, we must say, of revolutions. We saw on July the 2nd, 1776, the rebel colonies in North America, declared their independence from Britain. This was the first one. Then you know that there's the French Revolution, 1789. So it was an age of great changes. As far as England, yes, they lost on the one hand North America, but on the other, they expanded their colonies in the world. For example, with the explorations of Australia and New Zealand, they increased their already large colonies. Let's talk about the party system. So the two main parties were the Whig and the Tories. The Whig, in a way, were, you can think of them as those who represented the middle classes, the business classes, while on the other hand the Tories were more based on the land, on the aristocracy. Of course, you understand that if your income is based on the land does not change. So you want to keep the status quo, that is the present condition. If instead your income is based on business, you want to expand it, and so you are in favor of wars, of explorations and so on. Even if Great Britain became richer and richer because of the colonies, of the money gained from the colonies, the rich ones were not many. So most of the wealth, most of the money that was gained from the colonies remained in the hands of a minority. Most people remained in a poor condition. In this century, we have two other revolutions, apart the American Revolution and the French Revolution. We have the so-called Agrarian Revolution and the Industrial Revolution. What is the Agrarian Revolution? It's based on this, that the landowners to exploit even more their lands, also using new techniques, new machines, they had to enclose, to limit the access to those lands. Before, most of the lands were, open, so you could farm if you had animals, if you had cattle, you could move them anywhere. But now, with the Enclosure Act, with the law that enclosed the lands of the owners, you could not. And this creates, on the one hand, more benefits to some individuals, to the landowners. On the other hand, they deprived many people from a possibility to survive. This age, the age of reason, the Enlightenment, is also called the Augustan age, the age similar to the Emperor Augustus. Why? Well, this is something that happens quite often. You will see also later on in history that when a government wants to aspire to a certain level of glory, they have to base their present condition to the past. We saw this, for example, during fascism, when Mussolini reinvented a continuity with the Roman Empire, using symbols from the Roman period, and so on. Now, in the Augustan age, they tried to recreate the same glory of the highest period in Roman culture, the one of Augustus. Now, careful now. Art, literature had one purpose only, to show the absolute eternal truths in life. And what are they? They are the laws of the universe. And so, they had to achieve in music, in painting, in literature, three ideals. The ideals of order, harmony, and beauty. First of all, what is nature? Nature plays an important part. I'll show you now a passage from a poem by Alexander Pope about nature. And this can be a manifesto of the age. He says, first follow nature, and your judgment frame by your just standard. This is imitate nature and tune your ideas according to the standards, the models you can find in nature. Why? because nature is still the same, unerring nature. That is, nature has always been the same, ruled by the same laws. Still divinely bright. It's a divine creation. One clear, unchanged, and universal light. So nature is only one thing. It's clear to see what it is. It has never changed and is universal, true in every part of the world. Life, force, and beauty must do all impart. So everything you do, you can receive life, force, and an idea of beauty from nature. And nature is at once, at the same time, the source and end and test of art. That is, art should imitate nature. So nature is the source of inspiration. And the end of art is to imitate nature, and test of art means that if you don't imitate nature, it's not a work of art. Let's move now to the other keywords. Harmony. Harmony means that every player, every part in the play of life follows the rules. So there's no conflict, because a conflict a struggle can create a problem for the economy, can challenge the status quo. And who has the power? They don't want that. Another keyword is beauty. Beauty is based on neoclassicism. So a classical view of art, where the keywords are perfection and simplicity, form, taste, elegance. So in other words, imitate the classic standards. Don't try anything new. Order. Order is the base of peace, of prosperity. So if somebody tries to create disorder, to go against morality, the standard morality, the norms that are agreed upon by the system, they should be punished. So what they're proposing is the middle way, as we're going to see. Now, the readers in this period, the reading public was different, increased. Instead of before, in the past, the court was the place where intellectuals met, performed their shows. They had a patron. If you remember Shakespeare needed a patron, a noble person to support him. But now, from the court, the intellectual life moves to the coffee houses. It is, the cafes where people meet and discuss. Not only, as we're going to see, there are new professions, and one of these is the writer, the journalist, who are paid by their magazines instead of by an aristocrat. Basically, the society in this period was divided in three categories. The gentlemen, those who did not work but had an income from the land, the people, the middle class, and the mob. The mob means the crowd of lower classes, people belonging to the lower classes. The painting you see is by William Hogarth. William Hogarth was one of the most famous painters of the century in Great Britain. And with his illustrations, he tried to describe the evils of society. In this case, what you see is called Jean Lane. It describes how society, many people, are corrupted and destroyed because of alcoholism. In the foreground, you see a woman who is, while trying to feed her baby with her breast, let the baby fall down because she's more interested in drinking alcohol. So they used to drink a lot of alcohol, gin in this case, for different reasons. One was also hygienic reason, because water was polluted, and so alcohol was a way to drink something that was not contaminated. But as you know, alcohol could also reduce hunger. If you did not have anything to eat, alcohol could help you to forget about the feeling of eating. And so this is an example of the corruption of the century. We're going to see basically two writers in this century, and they represent a paradox. On the one hand, we're going to see a writer who trusted reason, absolutely. Reason was opposed to emotion, to passion. When we are controlled to passion and reason, that is the moment when we can make mistakes. Instead, when we follow logic and reason, we always find the true way. But there are also other writers who begin to have a doubt, to be not sure about reason, because they think sometimes reason can be mad. Among the writers who celebrate reason in their novels, in this new form of literature, new genre is called novel, they celebrate reason, individualism, self-help of the middle classes. Defoe and Richardson are just two of these important writers. Instead, on the other side, those who were not so sure about the sanity of reason was, for example, Jonathan Swift, who, through satire and parody, accused reason to be not sane. This was the age of journalism, of the first journals, independent journals, and so there was the need to write stories for a large reading public, and so they began to need stories about magazines, and they were the first professional writers. So those who were paid by their work, writing articles, writing stories, instead of depending on the aristocracy. An institution that was very important in the previous century was the Royal Society. Why? Well, because it was, say, a club of scientists who met to start to help each other with the development of science. Science needs also, for example, a language, a specific language. As you know, scientific English is not the same as fictional, the English you use in fiction or every day. One thing that you can see in the works I'm going to read is what is called the golden mean. The golden mean is the right measure of things. Is based on the classical idea that man is the measure of everything. This was typical of the Renaissance also. But now this golden mean means also that it's a compromise. So no extreme ways, just remain in the middle, don't challenge anything, and everything will be okay. The new genre, literary genre, was the novel. The word novel can give you an idea of the novelty of this genre, because it was different. In the past, there were romances. Romances were stories that were not realistic. They were mythical stories, fantastic stories with dragons, knights, and so on. But now, the new literary form tries to reproduce the real world in any way that it was possible. While in the past the protagonists of the stories of the romances were, superheroes, now in the novels the protagonists are just, normal people belonging to the middle classes, people we can see as us. What were the reasons that determined the rise of the modern novel? First of all, is the so-called empirism. That is, we can discover the truth through our senses. So, personal experience, the physical sensations were at the base of discovering, understanding who we are. Then, there was also a religious foundation, because according to some Protestant churches, you could only save yourself through work. So if you did not work hard, you could not save yourself. The table you see here can show very easily the difference between the past and the present. So romance is the narrative, typical narrative of the past. A novel is the new one of the 18th century. So who were the protagonists of the past? In the past there were mythical creatures, princes, superheroes. Now, normal people from the middle classes. Where did they set their stories? In the past, in places out of the world, wonderful places. In the novel, here and now, there are names of streets, places that you can find in a map. When? The time for the stories in the past was sometime in the past, in the moment when everything was like a fable. The novel set always the stories now, the present time. What happened in the past? Typical, exploits, the adventures of a hero. Today, the protagonists have to deal with everyday problems, most of all survival. How to find what things to do in order to eat, how to find a job, and so on. How? The style in the past was very elaborate because the reading public was the aristocracy. Now, they use a realistic style, a style that recreates the language used by normal people, the middle classes. Why? As you know, there's no story without a reason for action. In the past, the reason for action was love, honor, glory for the heroes. Now, money, survival, practical, everyday goals. Why did the writers tell their stories in the past? For the court, because the court paid them. Now, they have two important reasons. One, to criticize the evils of society and to reveal the true nature of things. This realism that characterizes the novel was, how can we describe this realism? First of all, you will see that quite often in the descriptions there is a reference to time, precise time, 1 o'clock, 5 in the afternoon. And the setting, the physical setting, was described exactly. To do that, they used, for example, they use adjectives to describe the quality, the color, the size, the number of things, so that you could see in front of you exactly what it was described. Was given great importance to money as a status symbol. So to become rich, to improve your social condition, was one of the most important things, the reason for action. And the new hero is quite important. The new hero was not a prince who fought against a dragon, no. He was a practical person, a person self-made, that is, who made himself, his life, without the help of the others. Self-reliant, that is, he depended only on himself. He did not depend on others, on the family, on friends, society. And he had the quality of common sense, that is, logical. He used the reason to discriminate, and prudence. He had to be careful not to spend the money, the capital he had in his hands. So it's quite the opposite of the adventures of the heroes. Let's summarize what we have been seeing so far. First of all, this new age, the 18th century, was called Augustan because it tried to imitate the reign of Augustus. There was a moment of stability and prosperity. It's also called the Enlightenment because they tried to analyze previous ideas through reason. And reason because common sense prevails over imagination. We saw also that the importance of nature, harmony, beauty, and order to preserve stability. The fact that journalism influenced the new forms of writing, and they try to find to spread a middle way, a compromise, without extreme decisions, just in the middle way, sort of making everybody happy. Philosophy influenced the new attention to the physical world. They influenced realism with the attention to the individual and the attention to the physical world. When we start reading the new stories, we are going to pay a lot of attention to the clock time, physical setting, and all the details that can help the reader to put himself or herself into the story. Also because the description of the adventures is based on everyday life, something we can understand because we know it very well. And the leading force is money, status, symbol, money, it is survival, becoming richer. It's the typical idea of the middle classes. Okay, I hope that this presentation can help you to understand the major ideas, but in the stories we're going to read together, we're going to see all these ideas into practice. So this is important as an introduction to the new century. Okay, thank you.